The following episode may contain spoilers for the game Frosthaven. Welcome to episode 9 of our board game podcast, A Master's Degree in Rolling Terribly. I'm your host, Eddie. Joining me is my co-host, a man who has really started to become a multitasking powerhouse. And I actually dread the day we lose his Geminate, Gaz. Say hi, Gaz.
Hi, Gaz. Well, that's a positive introduction. That's weird. I think we must be trying something new this week.
It's just trying on the nice.
That's it. Is that because of last week where I didn't throw shade at you for not doing anything? And so
yeah, you were really nice. We're having a nice month.
That's it.
And we're just going to keep the positivity up and just see how long this lasts.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm looking forward to it if we can have more intros like this.
Before we actually begin the actual episode, we actually have a bit of an errata section at the moment because we've actually had numerous listeners contact us regarding some things that they heard last week in last episode, episode 8, with a couple of rule things. And
many people.
Yeah, quite a few people reached out to us via Reddit and also via email.
They kept doing it, and Daddy kept messaging me going like, someone else emailed us, and I'm like, oh no, what else have we done? Like, are we even playing Frosthaven anymore?
No, I mean, yes, we are just apparently wrong in some areas. Look, they're not major, but on Reddit, originally the very person to contact me, and I'm just going to shout out to a few people who did. We had Pedo557 on Reddit, who actually was the first to give me the heads up that Snow Imps and the Brittle, they are innate in that they do it, right? They every single hit that they do will actually cast Brittle on us, and they are not brittle, so they're not crit hungry in receiving the way we treated them.
So for those that maybe didn't listen to the episode where we fought the Snow Imps for the first time, firstly, you should go listen to it. But secondly, we played that and talked a lot about how people were doing massive damage and et cetera, et cetera. So it definitely, once we heard that piece of news and Deddy told me, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like totally how their card's written, that's exactly how it should work.
Well, yeah, interestingly enough, when I was looking at the actual physical cards, because remember when we're using the Gloomhaven Secretary on the computer, and when we saw the actual thing, it's got the little symbol on the monster, the sheet online, and I went to find the physical one to see what it said, and it said like it just has the symbol on the physical one as well. But this was the first monster that we've seen that had it. There's another one. If I just kept going, there's another one that had wound on it, which is not going to be like, oh, it's passively got a wound on it and it's just going to die by the end, right?
Yeah, and that's when you told me about it, and I thought, like, it only took me a second to trigger to be like, yeah, that's totally makes sense, because I thought about how every other card's presented, innate poison, innate wound, all that stuff just has that thing. It's not a status effect. It's that it's a status effect applies. So, but we had a bit of a chat because one of the fears that I know you had was like, oh, have we just, because of that, we basically means the whole scenario is kind of...
Do we have to redo it?
Yeah. And I think when we thought back, they actually only drew like one attack card, I believe, in the whole like 3 or 4 turns they were alive. Maybe 2, but I know we only really got attacked like once, and I'm pretty sure that one, it had Brittle on the attack anyway.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was one right at the end that I got hit, and I ended up taking extra damage because of it. So the only real difference is they died quicker. But again, I feel like we were drawing... Well, it's probably mostly just Phil, because he only has green cards in his deck. So when they've got 3 life or 5 life, they were dying in one hit anyway. So it wasn't really enough for us to warrant, we've got to go redo that whole thing. It was just like, all right, live and learn. It's awesome that someone pointed that out for us. And we'll just keep doing that now moving forward, which actually, spoilers come up. We actually ran into a bunch more and we're like, hey, we know what these things do now. They're really, really deadly.
I was going to say, yeah, they yeah, they're really scary. And I was thinking that once we worked that out, I was like, oh, look, we dealt with them this time. They didn't seem too bad because of the card draw. But, now we know if we see these guys again, yeah, a little bit scared. Hopefully we don't see these guys in a while. So Peter also said congrats to me for nearly getting my mastery. And he said that it was pretty cool that I almost got it on that last scenario because he didn't come anywhere near close to getting it. And it's sort of further cementing how difficult this is for me to get off.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty cool.
Do you get like half a tick for almost getting your mastery?
No, you get negative tick actually. I think I go backwards.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I push all my tokens forward now. GDJT, sorry. He advised that the returning to Frosthaven isn't optional the way that we've kind of been playing it. And, going from one to another, we're just like, hey, we don't want to go back. Like, we don't have any reasons to go back. We don't want to. And we specifically said, well, why would we go back when we don't have a reason to? We don't want to tick the time passes, right? We don't want to do that. Unless it's force linked.
Yeah. And this was one that was more surprising and also more disappointing because I remember making a specific point, maybe multiple times, on different episodes, how much I love that there was actually a decision whether you do or don't want to go back. I was like, yes, it's so cool. It's not just don't go back and avoid a road event. It's like, yeah, we can stay out. We don't want to tick time past. That was cheating. So it turns out the really cool thing I wanted to do wasn't really allowed.
This one's a bit harder to reverse. Just based on we had a bit of a discussion as we were playing on Monday how we were going to actually handle the mistakes that were made because we want to be as straight as possible through most of it, like through our playthroughs. And we decided, do we mark a few things forward, but then do we do multiple outpost phases? Do we, what's the easiest and cleanest way to do this? And I think we came to the decision that we're only about 8 or 9 scenarios in out of the whole thing. We will, starting with this particular one, head back to Frosthaven to make sure we do an outpost event and the whole outpost phase. But we, decided that we probably were going to keep it for now.
Yeah.
Hoping that it doesn't, screw us.
Yeah, it wouldn't have ticked us over into winter. It wouldn't have really done anything other than having more outpost events, that's where it gets a bit screwy. If we just tick off, say, I think we worked it out, it was at least 2 times that we should have returned when we didn't, maybe a third, but I couldn't figure out where that was. So I still actually, I'm pretty confident it was just 2. It's not going to have a massive impact. It's not like we're at a scenario 50, right? We go, oh, wow, we should actually be so much further along. Yeah, so again, really, really glad someone pointed that out. So thank you. And I think someone else did as well. So yeah, keep reminding us about this one thing that we've done wrong. Appreciate it. But no, honestly. But the other thing was that, it just becomes really hard to fix. And we didn't want to tick the boxes off without doing the events, without having the build phases and all those extra things that go along. Because again, unlike Gloomhaven, going back isn't just as simple as like, okay, you back level up. Right? Like, whereas there's go back, there's do an event, there's build, there's have resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in essence, I feel like we've balanced it because haven't ticked the time, but we also haven't got the extra builds. So, and I feel like that's the main kind of resource that you're using as you tick through that time.
Yes. GDJT also added that he is enjoying the podcast and he likes our after action format. Which is really cool.
Cool, I enjoy it too.
Yeah. Iron and Wine on Reddit also brought up the Snow Imp situation, but he also added that the Drifter Persistent cards count as playing lost cards for battle goals.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. That's cool. Well, he was the one that brought up the Geminate thing and picked me up on that. So that's really cool. Again, like, I am completely fine with feedback, and I actually quite enjoy, or I really appreciate how it's being presented, because the content, the messages, the emails, etc., could have been sent with like, "Hey, you suck. You're doing it wrong. Don't do it wrong. Right? Stop cheating."
That's all coming now. You realize
that?
Yeah,
100%, right? Like, for those that don't know, we've been slowly putting things up on YouTube, so I'm expecting those comments to be 100% like, "Do you even Frosthaven?" So, but But no, in all seriousness, yeah, appreciate that. And there is it's because it's the tabletop game and there's so many intricacies about it. We don't realize when we're doing things wrong. I mean, for example, the brutal one we could have figured out, and the Return to Frosthaven one, if we actually read the rules rather than just guessing and assuming we knew how to play, again, we could have picked up. But because it's so new, some of those things are really hard to validate. It's like, hey, how do we think this works? And then you go, well, we can't really Google it because no one's got any answers, and we don't want to go too hard into spoilers. So it is really helpful for people who have played through this.
Yeah, some of the things that, like the snow imps in particular, that was one thing that actually came up when they were revealed, and we weren't 100% sure. And like, I'll disclose that it's my copy of Frosthaven, and the guys come over to my house to play it, and I'm the one that read through the rule book and everything, and I'm running it essentially. So anytime something comes up that no one's really quite sure of, it gets shot straight to me, and I'll have a bit of a look into it if I don't have a direct answer for it, and we'll pass the rulebook around while I'm on my phone having a quick Google. Something I probably should do is maybe take advantage of the Discord a little bit more to throw those quick questions, because the community there is really good at getting answers back as an option.
Yeah, but I mean, when we really kind of think about it, and not that I want to point fingers, but it's your fault. Is that
Yes.
what you're saying? Yeah.
I'm 100% saying it's my fault. But the fact that no one else read the rule book is also, it's a team game.
Yeah, well, that's it.
When the
We
mercenaries
all,
dropped into Frosthaven, everyone got a little manual of how to do Frosthaven, right? And I'm the only
yeah,
one
well,
that
it was
read it.
shared resources, wasn't it? Like it was collective resources of read the book, and you read the book. We had to pick one person. It was an event at the start of Frosthaven.
Look, at the end of the day, I'm sure there's a lot of groups out there who would have made other mistakes that are very different. And this is kind of where that house rule variant thing came up in the forums.
Yeah.
People come up with different ways of doing different things, and it's very interesting. I'd love to know if there was a group out there that played a game flawlessly of the original Gloomhaven.
Well, they wouldn't know, right? Like how,
Yes.
I remember playing through Gloomhaven. I think we mentioned this, but we were doing stun wrong for about a quarter of the campaign, where it wasn't dropping off when it was supposed to, and we realized, and we're like, oh, okay, that's a bit
Mind you,
weird.
it was bad for them and bad for us.
It
Like,
was. It was.
bad.
It just made stun. But yeah, we weren't getting stunned as nearly as much as we were stunning them. But yeah, it definitely was really bad. So, look, these things happen, and I think that's the key for us is once we're aware of it, we fix it,
Yes.
and then we just keep moving forward because we're still having fun. We're not doing any of it deliberately, and as you said, we get across these rules, and we actually had one with the scenario we're going to talk about today, where we had to reread the rules several times to make sure what we were going to do we could do based on the scenario. And even then, it was still a bit like, oh, like it could be worded a bit better. And we're going to assume this isn't a problem. Otherwise, they would have called out that you can't do this. So yeah, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for reaching out to us and contacting us via Reddit and email. We can also be DM through Instagram and any of those kind of channels. If you had something you wanted to bring up, like feel free. One of the people that were messaging me said, "Do you want me to let you guys know what that you may have done wrong, or I'll just shut up?" And I was just like, "No, God, no! Like, definitely let us know. We are all ears. We want to do this properly. We're not experts in it. We're just enjoying a playthrough and sharing that with everyone else. So please, if you have something to say, obviously send it through to us. I would love to hear it."
Yeah, that's something that I think we've talked a little bit about is we're not claiming to be pro Frosthaven players, right? In actual fact, we're probably really bad at it. So not that we want people telling us how to play our classes, but anything you've got to comment on how we're going or what we're doing, and especially if it's a rules thing that we're talking about how cool something is and you're like, whoa, that's not how you're supposed to do that. Please, reach out, be nice, but reach out.
So on this particular episode, we actually cover an outpost phase. We actually cover two. So we do one at the very start because we weren't planning on necessarily going back to Frosthaven until we were
that's
ready.
Right.
So someone gave us our marching orders and said, "Hey, you guys are breaking the rules. You need to go back." And we're like, "Oh." So we head back and we have an outpost phase. And this was actually one that actually ticks over one of the sections. And this is one of the sections that a lot of you listeners who have been playing this would have actually covered and unlocked this particular scenario, which is the one that we ended up doing. So we actually went back to do our Frosthaven outpost event. where we did some buildings. I think we definitely built. I think we built a sled. We actually put a sled together.
Yeah, so we built a wall.
Yes.
We crafted a sled. I think we also discovered that there was a whole bunch of items that we were supposed to have in our crafting box.
I think that was the second.
We didn't discover that yet. Okay.
No.
I did get a potion though. I did brew another potion. So
yeah, I actually don't remember what it was.
I do, but I'm not going to say because spoilers.
No, that's fair.
But I got to open a little advent calendar window again. It's the most fun part and seeing what it is. So that was pretty cool.
And then we actually spent a fair bit of time working out where to go next and weighing up all the different options of all the different available scenarios that we hadn't done yet.
Yeah.
And after a bit of a discussion about it, we ended up deciding on going with the one that we just unlocked. And like I said, this is the one that a lot of people will do fairly early if once they reach this particular part in well, they would have reached it earlier than us because they would have been taking the days off more.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
So this is scenario 114.
Yeah, because this is one that I believe is opened up because there was two on the time passes where we got to this point. There was one number, like kind of envelope read kind of prompt that's printed on there, and there was one that we wrote, and the one that we wrote was after a scenario, I believe. We unlocked it, and it said in 3 days' time, write this number. Yeah. So we actually hit both of them at the same time, and I believe it was the second one. It was that one that we got that was in the future to write down. That was the one that we triggered, because the one that's printed on there, I think, is the one that, again, I'm not going to do spoilers, but gives you a bunch of stuff. So
okay, that makes sense then. So there's a chance that people didn't actually have this one yet, depending on the scenario that they would have received it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Somebody's probably going to email us now and go, "Hey, they told me to email them when they were wrong." So and tell me that I'm wrong about this. But I have a feeling that was the order in which we read them out. So, but either way, you're right. The people are going to get it around this time because I believe they unlocked it as part of the end of one of the core scenarios.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So yeah, we basically are going to be heading towards scenario 114, which is called Work Freeze. And then we finish off the session with another outpost event, which gets us ready for the next sitting that we actually get together and do. And we also have a bit of a chat afterwards about scenario variety and complexity. And do we like what we've been seeing?
So the scenario 114 to the Work Freeze, we had a road event. I can't remember what that was. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was a dude that was asking us a question regarding
the quiz. Okay. So just as a heads up for anyone doing the quiz, right? If you're the person that figures it out right at the start, as soon as the riddle comes out, and then the person next to you says, "Nah, it's not that," it probably was that. Okay, just as FYI. So I'm just throwing it out there that I absolutely nailed the exact answer for it right after it, and I was shut down immediately, and that completely threw us off. So.
Yeah. That was a fun one. We'll give that one to Kaz. It was a stupid answer, which then turned into that was a stupid riddle.
It wasn't a stupid answer. It was a legitimate answer.
That's why I'm agreeing with you, but then changing it to the riddle's dumb.
The riddle was fine. I like riddles. It was clever. I was trying to explain to all of you that the riddles aren't supposed to be academically hard. They're supposed to be tricky, right? And that's why that answer, again, worked for so many reasons. But anyway, I digress.
So this particular section that we read out was introducing us to a new character called Pinter. I think it was Pinter. I think he was a Quattrel. One of those little gizmo dudes.
So you're going back to the guy that gave us the quest to go do this scenario.
That we're doing right now.
Yeah, not the road event.
No. I'm just saying that we're headed there, and it was about the setup essentially of what happened in a way story wise. We're heading up with a bunch of explosives into some kind of mountain area to set these explosions off to, I think, break through either a mountain or something to create a shortcut for trade and other purposes, right?
Yeah.
And easy traversing. So, here we are with a bunch of C4 heading up to this particular hotspot, and what could possibly go wrong, right? Yeah,
well, I think most things went wrong at some point during this scenario. Now, things went really right, and then things went really wrong, and then kind of mellowed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So setup was normal. I didn't put extra tiles this time, which was really cool. So Frosthaven Scenario Viewer did a really good job with the one tile it told me to put together. And one of the first mobs that I realized I was setting up was snow imps. It's very fitting. Very fitting that they
So
were back.
again, thank you for letting us know before we did this scenario, because this scenario would have been completely different if we
Yeah.
had treated them all as brittle and not giving us brittle.
Yeah, and these particular snow imps got patched. So these ones actually give brittle. They don't have innate brittle. These ones learnt they don't want to get double damage critted.
Yeah.
Which is quite funny. We also popped wolves.
Yeah, we haven't seen them in Frosthaven.
No, we skipped scenario 0. So I know that they were involved in scenario 0. We actually skipped
Okay.
that. So this is our first introduction to hounds, and I believe that there's
Wolves.
a hound variety
It's
in
wolves, isn't it?
No, I think it's hounds.
Is it? Oh, okay.
But there's a hound. There's a variety of them in Gloomhaven, so we know that they're kind of attacking packs, and they hit pretty hard when they're usually adjacent to each other, and that kind of stuff, right?
Why were there hounds there?
I don't know.
My immersion was there, and now it's lost again.
I think wolves and hounds are very similar.
No, like hounds are dogs. Wolves, I mean, they're canines,
Wolves
I
are
guess.
dogs.
Yeah, but hounds,
We're not
like,
going
if
into this.
release the hounds. It's like what they do at rich people when they, send
Yeah, and
dogs
they're
after
scary
people.
and they tear you apart, and they have bonus attack on adjacency when they release
Yeah,
the hounds
but
on
it's
you when
not
you're
release the
trespassing.
wolves.
Oh,
Like,
well, it's a fancy way of saying it. We're in a
throw
fancy
them
part
to
of
the wolves.
Frosthaven.
Like, no, anyway, yeah.
All right, so we had wolves. Okay, we had wolves, and we also had a polar bear, which was really cool because I have seen this standee, and I couldn't wait to find out when we were actually going to use it. And this is the scenario: we have a lonely polar bear chilling in the middle of the map, and then we also set up some pillars.
Yeah,
Our friends, the pillars, and these ones have a yellow border, which means they are an objective instead of other
an
stuff.
obstacle or a difficult terrain.
That's right.
And so these snow imps, the polar bear, and these wolfhounds, were all having a jamboree. They were just hanging out, chilling, and we decided to rock up and start this demolition.
I don't know if that's what happened. I think we started the demolition, and then they were like, "Whoa, what's going on over there? Let's all team up because we're 3 species that hang out a lot together."
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And ruin these guys. So yeah, our scenario goal just from this initial setup, we had 4 pillars set up. We had a bunch of angry animals. There was a lot of them actually,
It
and
was that first setup. I remember you just kept putting things on, and then the icing on the cake of how busy the board was that there was A, B, C, and D
yeah, little
tokens as
tokens.
well, and it was
Yeah.
like you're reading through, and you're like, when you're listening, but you're not really following because you're trying to take in all of the things. I was sitting there going like, Daddy's just saying words now. Like, I'm not sure what
How
any
do you
of these
think I
things mean.
felt? So on this scenario setup book, there's a massive purple box that says scenario like special rules. And just quickly, the actual scenario goals was to actually destroy 8 pillars, right?
Yeah.
I think it's tied to it's tied to our player count. So destroy these 8 pillars. And then we've got the scenario rules, and it's explaining how we can actually use. And the minute when I started to read this, Gaz was nodding his head because he was like, "Cool, this makes a lot of sense. We've got a lot of things here, but we can use it." And there are the explosives, which conveniently only spawn in the corners. And you can actually, and this is what I thought was really cool. You go there and you forego either a top or a bottom action to pick one up. And then, yeah, you can throw it to the side. We'll go into our discussion about it a little bit later because we have a lot of thoughts on this. But yeah, you can effectively either get hit with it and it pops, or you can throw it on the ground and attack it. And it pops. And when it pops, it does, in our situation, based on the scenario level, it was doing 8 damage on its space and all adjacent spaces, which once we set up and understood the special rules, we kind of had an idea of, okay, we see what's happening here. We need to destroy the pillars, and there's a lot of things here. And then Gaz came up with a real brilliant idea.
It seemed like the room was so small, and we started so close to the bombs that we could just spawn next to the bombs, use a top action to grab a bomb, and then use a jump action to jump in the middle of all of the monsters and interrupt their party and the pillar. So basically, turn 1 was designated to me and Daddy strap a bomb and go jump into the middle of the bear and the wolf hound imps, and just go boom.
Yeah, and discard a card.
And well, yeah, because I think the logic behind it was that it was going to do 8 damage again, assuming we got to go first and we got to get hit things. But basically, like I think I was going to be landing next to 3 of them and the pillar. So I was like, okay, if I had a burn card that said deal 8 damage to 3 targets
Mm,
and do an objective,
mm,
you totally use it, right?
100%.
So it was like do that and burn a card and that's fine. And you kind of figured the same as well. Like I think you were going to hit 2 and a pillar, so it's still pretty good.
Well, interestingly, when we were deciding which pillars, we picked the two that were where the door was, right? We made a conscious decision to also blow that up, which we didn't know what that was going to lead to.
Yeah.
We also had
Yeah.
two of the spawn points were part of the special rules is every round alternating spawn points will spawn either a polar bear or 2 more snow imps.
Yeah, so
So
just to do
yeah,
a little recap on that. So in that room, this is what made it such a complex room. I won't say complex, it's not hard, but there was just so many little things going on. Is there were 4 pillars. In the scenario, we had to kill total of 8. But 2 of those pillars were against a wall, and once they were destroyed, basically the wall comes down, and then it opens up the next section, which is we're assuming it's going to have 4 more pillars in it because we needed to find 4 more to kill. In that room as well, though, in our main starting room, there was 2 spawn points. There was one was going to spawn 2 imps, and on the next turn it was going to spawn a snow polar bear, right? And that was just going to alternate forever.
mm,
And so we kind of went, well, I guess let's blow up the wall and let's basically open the door,
yeah,
which we did, and it kind of worked in our favor, but also just got way more hectic and it
yeah.
was just chaos. This scenario, and we will talk about it later. I don't want to go into these details right now, but this scenario was just chaos, like constantly.
Well, it was another no prep, because we had to right at the beginning. Gaz and I were going to go and forego a top action to pick up these bombs, and then spend our bottom action to basically run, jump, whatever into the packs to get hit. Funnily enough, Gaz went first and managed to get his positioning right, and then the snow imps went before me, which was a bit annoying. Oh, I'm trying to remember exactly
Yeah, it
what
was
happened.
because one
He
move,
moved.
so you didn't.
Yeah,
You only were going to kill one and the pillar, but the other thing as well is you got brittled. So
I got
when you got
brittled.
hit by the bomb, you took
Yeah,
16. I was like, hey, if you're going to burn a card, you may as well make it
yeah.
efficient, right? Like,
Yes. So it was really good. And yeah, we blew up those 2 pillars and we still had the remaining ones. Calvin was building up his little army
hmm.
and Phil was dying.
Yeah, just to clarify as well, because in case people have done this scenario and didn't do this way, right? Because there was a couple of ways you could go about this. The reason this worked is that the rule for the barrels or the explosives are that on your turn you can drop them in an adjacent square, and then if anybody moves onto that square, uh, it blows up. Or if you're holding one and you take any damage, then it blows up. So the idea was we were jumping in next to these monsters and then getting punched, and that's what was detonating them.
Mm,
So just to again, just to be super clear, and that was
yeah,
actually the part that we had to reread a few times because
to make sure we could do that and it was
yeah,
legit.
because the wording on it was a bit weird, but we kind of went with like, okay, well, this is how they're describing it. I'm not going to read it out, but this is how they're describing it, and I feel like if they really didn't want this to happen, they would have called it out in a section that talks about when you get hit. So
Yeah, cue the
hopefully,
emails.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
What's
Please get onto us and tell us that we stuffed it up. So
So then we went into the next bit that's opened up. So once those 2 bits blew up, we'd actually taken out quite a few creatures. That was like polar bear obviously has the most health, so it wasn't going to get one shot, but nearly everything else was. And there was a couple of stragglers, but the minute we opened it up, we read the next section, and along with that came the second part of the map, which was the same size, with some difficult terrain on the other side of it, of the door, and more polar bears, more snow imps, and more hounds, and of course more pillars. And there was also the movement of the spawn points. So that was one thing that we didn't realize was going to happen, which was really, really cool. As we were reading the special rules, we realized the spawn points moved further back, which kind of gave us a little bit of a breather. And we started dealing with the monsters that we actually had. We had so the hounds, for example, they if you've played against hounds, you would know they are very attacky, very piercy. They've got a card that literally says attack with pierce, move, attack with pierce. And they've got a bonus when they're swarming, which luckily we didn't really have that much problems dealing with. They do have they had an initiative 6 move attack mobilize as well, which
Oh yeah, they got that one out.
sure.
Yeah, they managed to, and this is again a credit to the amazing way the monster deck just absolutely wrecks you. Is that I believe in a couple of turns they pulled a go really late card when
Yeah.
Phil wanted to go after them
Yes.
because he wanted to pick up a bomb and go do something with it, but because they were going late and he was next to them, he would just blow up. And then the following turn, one was next to me, and I was going to do this really cool jump, disarm, blow up thing, and get out of like dodge and heal myself and all these cool things. And it was like, nah, 6 immobilize, you can't go. I was like, oh, cool. I guess I'll stay here then. And the thing is that really it's like the icing on top of the cake that just kicked you in the balls. It's they have retaliate. So they immobilize you, and then the attack you were going to do when you were going to move somewhere else and not hit the thing with retaliate, you can't even just stand there and punch them because you're like, I guess I could hit it and then take 2 damage. I don't want to do that. No. So it is, and I'm pretty sure the card I had was attacked 2 times for 2. I'm like, I'm just gonna get booked here if I actually hit this thing. So I guess I do nothing. Like, and it's just, I mean, it's great, but it's just like, oh, really? Again,
yeah, convenient, very convenient. The good thing about the wolves is they didn't come back. They didn't respawn. It was only polar bears and snow imps. So we didn't really have to deal with an endless supply of wolves, especially when they're coming in duos and really ripping you apart. The polar bear, there were 2 cards that I noted that they did that was really interesting. They went at a 14, move 1, attack, mobilize. So they also went super fast. They just moved a little bit slower and also could immobilize, which booked me a little bit later when I was starting to wail on some pylons. And they also have a card that has an initiative of 3, which gives them shield, retaliate, heal, which, yeah, was a really fun one, especially when they're going that early. Other than that, not a massive threat, but pretty heavy hitters. When you combine that with a bunch of buffers, strengthers, and brittlers, then gets
yeah. We got pretty lucky with the polar bears though, because they were spawning pretty far away, and they were only moving 2 or 3, and by that stage we were back. So I think we managed to avoid getting hit by those for a lot of turns. And those attacks, I think they can hurt, especially like you said, especially when you're brittle. Like hitting for 3s and 4s on a base is just does a lot of damage.
So when we saw that next room, I think we were then discussing how exactly we were going to deal with this, because we realized the pylons the pillars, only had 1 shield. They have 6 health and 1 shield for our difficulty, which really wasn't that bad. And then we kind of hit us that we don't necessarily need the bombs, thinking that this was going to be a full bombing run situation where we have to somehow get these bombs from one side of the map to the other to blow up the pillars. And the bombs may be probably a little bit more useful for doing what we did at the start by clearing that first room, but also maybe dealing with the waves of enemies. So Phil and Gaz, I believe, were hanging back to deal with the first 2 along with Calvin and maybe clear some more debris. I just know that Phil was getting messed up. I don't know how. Do you remember why he was getting messed up?
Because like everything was just hitting us. Like there was still so much stuff there that we just couldn't deal with. And because the brittle and you being immobilized, and like those snow imps, like the range ended up putting them within range of us a couple of times. I think once they ate an element and attacked us twice for some reason. So it just ended up, it was lots of little hits, and unless I put my shields up, I don't have a lot of damage mitigation, and Phil has none. So
and he also has no healing as well. So the minute he starts dropping, he's
like heals. So, but the other thing that made it tricky was that, and you 100% did the right thing, but you just like booked it straight into the other room to start messing up the pillars, but you were really far away, which just basically meant that you were drawing some of the aggro, but everything else left over was just kind of piling into me and Phil. And I think again, Phil had jumped in a turn after us, or 2 turns after us, to go and kill the other pillar with a similar fashion. They jump in there with a bomb and blow up and kill a bunch of things. And that things moved around and they hit him a little bit more than he needed to. And I think he ended up being on 1 hit point.
Yes.
And it without being able to be healed, and it's just
Yeah.
such a bad number because
Well, funny you should mention that because then he kept going, well, I may as well kill this wolf. He kept pulling a +1, which allowed him to just kill the wolf, which meant the retaliate didn't go off, which would have killed him. But he didn't think of that until he was attacking it without thinking about the retaliation that was going to make him discard a card. And he happened to keep pulling a card that was just enough damage to kill the wolf. And every time it happened, it was hilarious because we were pointing it out. We're like, you were so lucky. And then he realized and was like, oh, and he was, well, it was smiles all around. It was just so funny.
It was a bit funny. So yeah, so that was just it became this weird game at that point, which was kind of midway through because this scenario only, I think by the end we only went for like 6 turns. Like it was really fast. Yeah. So the midway, which was really like say turns 3 and 4, was mostly, I know, me and Phil kind of standing somewhere in the middle, just getting pummeled, trying to figure out how are we going to make the most of our cards. He was burning through cards and he was like, I don't have many turns left. So it was really about how he could do as much damage to the key objectives as possible. And so that was a weird kind of mid-turn. And that was where I was looking and going like, oh, I think we could be in a lot of trouble here.
Yes. There was a couple of key things. So at the very beginning, my drifter setup, we strapped on the +2 movement. We strapped on crushing weight because after like the first round was a bombing run. The second round, I needed to have a prep round in there because I had a feeling once we realized we can go and attack these things, I was gonna head with a massive 6 movement jump as far to the back as I could with the 4 movement +2 from the persistent. And I was gonna hop my way all the way to the back and start wailing on these things. And with one of the drifter cards is a PS3 melee attack, which then becomes a 5. And I'm praying for a +1, which I didn't get. It just meant that I could clean up some of these pillars whilst everything was starting to close in on me. So I had a buttload of snow imps starting to spawn on me, and I had cards for days. So I wasn't too worried about it. It just became literally it was an RNG race of how well I was going to draw. And unfortunately, on the very first pillar that I went to wail on, I hit it for 5 with Pierce. So that meant I had to hang around for another round at least. And on my following round, I'd have to hit it and then run away. And then I got hit with a immobilize from the polar bear. And I was like, cool, I guess I'm going to hang around here and take even more damage. So that was what I was doing on that end. The boys were back at the, like you said, in the middle, playing with, Phil was playing with his discard pile a lot. And Gaz had a really good M-Dirt.
Oh, my level 3 card. So one of the advantages of us getting forced back to Frosthaven was that I'd actually leveled up. So it was like, well, I guess you guys can't force me to not level up. So one of the cards I got, amongst other things, has a big attack on the bottom. Sorry, on the top. I think it's an attack 6, I believe. And these pillars had 5 and a shield or something like that, right? So I just had to pull a 0 and it's fine.
6 health and shield.
Yeah, exactly. So I had a fresh deck, right? Freshly shuffled, so all of my cards. And just along with my upgrade deck, this is what makes this even worse, is that I had blessed myself. So I had an extra crit in there. And through one of my cards, I can do that. And I also have an extra crit, because that's part of my
perk modifiers. Yeah,
it's like it gives an extra crit, but then it also puts brittle on me. So it's just the, the flavor of the Geminate. So there was a lot of crits in there, and but there was also a miss, and that miss happened to be on top of my deck. So when I pulled one card, it was just like, bubble, your big burn card that you wanted to use to kill this pillar does 0. So that was a bit like of a letdown, and it threw back to a couple episodes ago. We talked about house rule variants, and I think one of the ones people came up with was if you if you miss on a burn card, single damage burn card, then it doesn't get lost. And we didn't just add that variant to our game, but I was thinking like, that doesn't sound like such a bad variant right now. So
I was too busy doing something else at the time. I just heard the card flip and I heard you go, no, and I looked up and your stack was like a full modified deck with one card flipped over and it's a miss. And then I'm like, and then you explained, that was my burn card as well, my lost card, and then you brought up that that variant, like, if only we were playing with that variant. That's what made it very memorable.
The other thing as well that I wanted to do was I was looking at my cards and I had a combination which I could have given myself advantage, but I needed to wait one more turn because I needed to create a certain element, which I could have done. But looking where I was, there was one pillar that was probably the furthest away from us, and the attack that I was using, I think it's like a range 4/5 attack. So I was like, I'm within range. You're getting pinned down by these polar bears. If I can take this pillar out, you've only got to get a few spaces to get the last one, and then we're kind of it gives us a couple of turns just to pile into this last pillar. And so I was like, I think it's just worth going for it now rather than waiting a turn and trying to figure out all this other stuff. And it turns out it wasn't, but we won anyway, right? But it doesn't. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I went for the second pillar after my immobilized round and started wailing into that. Gaz was dealing with another pillar. Some of the pillars had been chipped away a little bit, and then we realized we had one more pillar after my one, which I was planning on heading to and actually burning my double attack card on it to try and make sure that we can definitely down it. Which well, I'll explain in a second. Phil immediately gave us that look and went, "Don't worry about that one." And he does that thing all the time where he's like, "No, don't worry about it." Now, we're used to hearing this from during this whole campaign, but we actually look at him and say, "Yep, we get that. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it this round, or don't worry about it next round, or which round are you
when
not to worry about?"
Yeah, is it not worry about it at all, or just like is there a certain point in which we should stop worrying, right? Because we're worried now, okay, and then it's always just like, no, it's fine, I've got it, and then you'd be like, okay, cool, that's great, like, I'll love it, that's a headache gone, and then you'll move on to planning other things, and then you'll be like, oh, so you've got that one, don't you? Because I'm gonna go, oh no, I don't have it now. And you're like, what do you mean now? When do you have it? Like when is it fine? Because normally though he's sitting on a really big pile of cards, shadows everywhere, and he's going to have some big kind of 2-turn combo. He was really low on cards, sitting on 1 HP next to like 12 dudes, and I'm like, I don't know if you have more than one turn, right? Like you've there's a really good chance that you don't survive. So I'm not sure that we should be relying on I've got this next turn.
Yeah, and we had also completely stopped killing anything that wasn't a pillar. So everything was just the imps were chewing me down. Once I had been at the back for a little while and I'd let the polar bears wail at me, they all moved. I had 3 around me and I had all the ranged imps firing on me. And one of the rounds prior to that, they also buffed each other with strengthen. So I was absolutely copying it. And luckily I had a lot of cards, but I was chucking cards away. And that was the plan. It was just go in deep and do everything. We also had to make sure that once we killed them all, we survived. And this is where Bone Shapers come in handy because they can't move into choke points with their massive army and also endless spawns of snow imps and everything else. So as long as Calvin stayed at the back, he was fairly safe and we would be 100% fine. So Phil, definitely he did his thing where he sucks all his shadows, and I don't really know how it works, but he throws shadow stuff at the last one. And he took it out. And then I actually checked my modifier. We'd essentially won. I checked my cards of what was going to be after the scenario finished, and I wouldn't have actually killed it because I pulled 2 red cards. So it actually was a really good thing that he said he could take care of it at that particular time. Otherwise, it would have gone an extra round, and who knows if I would have survived that.
You're missing a really pivotal moment.
Oh, what did I miss?
Well, so the turn before...
Was it when he died?
No, that wasn't pivotal. That was just...
The
turn before you were to move in and kill the middle pillar, right? So at this stage, we have 2 pillars left. One on full. The other one, I think, might have been on full. Maybe it got hit. It feels like, no, I've got that other one. Don't worry about it. And you needed to jump over and get these guys, right? Like you had moved over a little bit next to the pillar. I think you were going to hit it next turn. And I looked at my cards and like, okay, well, I could do a little bit of damage here, or I can jump next to these 5 snow imps. And
about to shoot me.
Yeah, that are all this turn are going to, and I don't know if I think we drawn the cards, so you could see that what they were going to do. And I'm like, this is probably the best option. And granted, this stage I had about 3 HP, and I had maybe about 5 cards left, like total in my hand. No, I think I had about 3 cards left in my hand and I had 2 in my discard. So I was like, I can burn a few cards, but this is the point of it isn't really to do much. It's just to stop Deddy from dying because he had all the
Yeah.
good cards and he had the momentum. So I jumped literally right next to 5 of them that were all strengthened and throwing brittle at me, and it was just like bang, 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 bang. Like, I felt like Boromir, like
And oh, Boromir, yeah. You went full Boromir. That's exactly it.
yeah. And I managed to tank all of them.
Yeah.
And on the last one, died because I think I burnt the 2 cards in my discard pile because I'd run out of cards in my hands, but none of them touched you. And then
Yeah.
it was like, okay, then you had your turn and killed the pillar. I was like, oh, okay, it was totally worth it. Like it was,
Yes.
just throw myself at these mobs.
Well, I was
And
like, I should be okay, and then I was like, oh, maybe not. I don't know. So yeah, we made that plan. And you said, no, I can take all those shots. And if you didn't, probably would have died. Right? I probably would
mm,
have ticked over. And it was such a clutch decision. And it was so cinematic. It was very cool.
yeah, it worked. It did work quite well. It worked quite well. And then I think that's it, right? We didn't fully map it out, but we looked at it, and in hindsight afterwards, I didn't have the cards really to do much to that pillar. It turns out Phil did kill that other one, but the one that you were going to kill that turn, if
Mm,
you had gotten slowed down, killed, or stopped, that would have been really tricky for us to do because
yeah.
like I was running long cards and I didn't have a lot of movement and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it did work out quite well.
Yeah, because that bone dancer was still effectively in the first room near like our spawn points. So if we had all dropped and this thing was like on 1 health, I'm not 100% sure how
No.
he was going to get that done.
Yeah, because normally we have these situations where it's okay because there's this inevitable wave of undead that's kind of coming up behind us, right? Like the Bone Shaper, don't get me wrong, does work. Like Kelvin makes that class work really well, and it's constantly just being involved in everything is really good. One of its downsides is its movement ability, and it's not just the character, it's also the summons. They're just slow, and he can do some things to move him around and stuff, but normally we're in a space where we go, okay, well, if we drop here, our army, we've got an army out in the next room, it'll just slowly move its way over and
Mm,
we can kill these monsters because most of the objectives are do a thing and kill all monsters. Because they were going to constantly spawn in this one, we looked at it and went, no, there's absolutely no way his army's going to get through that like mass of snow imps,
mm.
right? And you're right, if there was a pillar at the back that was on 1 HP, it would have been an absolute like massive effort
Unless he's got
for
some miracle card, give something 10 jump
Eat
and
grass run real
explode it.
fast, right?
Yeah, but they don't jump, do they? Maybe
Oh,
they do. I don't
maybe
know.
they do. We don't
They're
know.
Jordan their way over.
Yeah, so yeah, but no, you're right. It was like, we can't really rely on that. So it was good that we were able to pull out the big guns when we needed to.
Yeah, I feel a little bit for Calvin. I actually asked him after the session, I was like, are you enjoying your class? Are you enjoying the Bone Shaper? And he says, yeah, no. I said, because it seems like in a lot of them, if I was playing it, sometimes it can be tricky to see everyone run off, with crazy movement and doing all this kind of stuff. And he's always kind of stuck in the previous room in a lot of ways. And I'm checking in with him just to see if he's enjoying it. And he says he is, because I was like, do you want to start working towards a retirement goal so that you can take on something different? Is the playstyle too boring? And he said to me, no, but the cards he's choosing, it's probably based on the cards he's choosing,
Mm.
because when he's leveling up, he's going for a particular build. So it's more about the build option. Whereas it does do some cool stuff, but you have to kind of branch out towards the different cool stuff. He's
Mm.
already doing cool stuff.
Well, one of the things I noticed in that one, and it sounds like, or at least it looks like he's going to continue in this path, is he in the last scenario where he had his big Hodor moment and just like basically tanked those harrowers for ages.
Mm,
Was he played that card that basically every time he gets hit, he poisons something,
yeah,
or him or his minions. That's the cool thing. Anytime him or his summons get hit, the target gets poisoned, the attacker, and if they're already poisoned, they take a damage.
yeah.
He put that one on this turn early, and I feel like this one wasn't the best for that, but
No.
there's definitely going to be
Oh, that would be
now.
nuts if
Yeah,
because they're negating so much damage, right? He's constantly saying, "Oh, this one attacks your skeleton. No, it doesn't. Okay, cool. This one's attacking your wraith. No, it doesn't. Oh, okay, cool." But that's you're poison, like that's huge. It's actually
yeah.
really, really big, especially
Yeah.
from a support point of view for the rest of us.
Yeah. So
getting those statuses out there. So
yeah, so it looks like he might be able to slightly alter his playstyle to, and I don't want to say be involved more because I feel like he flips a lot of cards and he is involved. But you're right,
yeah,
like it's definitely a different playstyle to a lot of the other kind of classes, and
yes,
so yeah. But yeah, it'll be interesting, right? Because we're going to have that come up.
yeah.
I remember playing Gloomhaven and getting a class and playing like one scenario with it, and I was just like, nah, not a chance. I'm not doing this. And it was just because I could just tell, I could see it. I could say I can see how this would be really good, and I could see what I needed to do. But I was like, I just don't feel like playing that. And there was other classes that we'd unlocked, so I just went, nah, the person I was playing with was like, that's cool. I'm happy to play that class next time I retire. So I was like, great, cool. Well, I'll just create a new character with a different one and play that.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be those moments where
Yeah.
you're going to be like, I just don't like the play style of this, and we can go from there.
Yeah. Hopefully, like, yeah, some of the earlier scenarios, like, he's had some absolute MVP moments in actually quite a few scenarios, right? Through really, really clever clutch play. It's just, I constantly am looking, and it's kind of like when we're in that final room battling that boss, and he's, slowly getting those minions in that room to help us out, and then you can see him at the back sort of picking up loot, and you kind of feel like, oh, it's that similar kind of play style, but is it enjoyable? Like, is it? I'll be honest with you, I'm having an absolute blast with the Drifter. It's not boring at all, and there's nothing more fun than what I did right this time, where it was kind of like I needed to hit up this pillar, so let's move 6 and hit it for 5 with piercing and see what the modifier does. It's very satisfying, and you're playing Sudoku or whatever it is you're doing with your puzzles, and sitting there playing how does this AOE work?
Yeah,
and yeah.
That's it. I'm trying to place the different shapes in the different holes and trying to figure it all
I
out.
saw on Reddit someone 3D printed the AoE hexes, like see-through ones. Like,
Yeah, I thought about that. I was like, that would be amazing because there's just some of them. I sit there and I'm like holding the card, and you can't see me because we're not doing a video cast, but I'm turning the card slightly and trying to count the little hexes, and like if that's there and that's that one, and yeah,
you count it out, but then you also get the group to have a look as well. So all of us are like leaning over the table to just have a look at this card.
Yeah, correct.
How it's placed.
Yeah,
and there's been.
Yeah, that's it. Well, and there's been like times where that's it. I've played it. I'm like, can I hit that and that? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool. I can see how I didn't. So I'm getting better at like looking and. But yes, it's it is fun.
So at the end, everyone died except for Calvin, and that in turn let us win the scenario, which is really good because I didn't particularly want to do that one again. I'm going to jump into battle goals and DPS. And then we're going to probably have a little chat about that particular scenario because it actually stands out in a very interesting way. So the battle goals I can't remember the name of it, but never do a basic action, which was 2 ticks. Right. And I picked that one at the very start. And then when I realized that, it's so funny that you walk into a scenario thinking, oh, I reckon I can do this. Never do a basic action. I'm going to bring all my move up cards. I'm going to have my +2 movement, and I'm going to bring enough attack cards, and I should be good. And then you realize the importance of something that you need to do, like I need to run to the back to get this pillar ASAP. I don't have enough attack cards to do it. I'm going to have to use a basic attack, because basic attack still hits hard, right? It still hits for 4. I'm going to fail this. And I was like, no, I'm 100% failing this. I just need to, I don't want to redo this. So unfortunately, I did fail my battle goal. Gaz, do you remember what you had?
I think it was something like kill something by more than 4 damage.
Yes, you had Dynamo.
And I think I almost did. I needed to draw higher on one of the snow imps.
Right.
And I just didn't. It's a really tricky one for me with some of my cards. Like I've got a couple of big hits, like a 4 and a 5, I think, which could do it. But I mean, they're burn cards, so I can only really have one crack at it. But so most of my other ones, I need to kind of combo up. And I think I did that. I think I gave myself like a +4 and drew a card and got a 0. And it was on like 1 or something like that. So I was like, yeah, all right, cool. It doesn't really matter. But
yeah, that one's It's fun. It's fun if you get it. Like it's a bit RNG that to be able to hit that. And if something's on 1 health, right? That's your target. You don't want anyone else to take that one out.
Yeah, it's really tricky. I've had a couple of times, or it's come up a couple of times, and I very rarely pick it because, again, like most of my normal attacks are twos,
They
like
just hit
twos or
every.
maybe threes, and that's just not going to do it, right? Like I can't do four more if I'm only hitting for two,
Mm.
because then I've got to rely on like a crit. So I think though that my other one, oh yeah, that's right. I got the one that was like never play a burn card. And I was like, oh, okay, so this one basically says have no fun, don't play your class.
Yes.
And for those that are unfamiliar with the Geminate, the only way that I can get XP outside of some really, really niche situations, sorry, is to burn cards. So that's literally what it is. You have 14 cards, and the idea is you burn them all. So
Yeah,
it
you
was
haven't
like,
tried playing a no burn Gemini. Like, Phil played a no prep Deathwalker and it actually played really well in the last scenario. So
I did early the first scenario and then a little bit into the second scenario I did, but I don't get any XP. Like I know that
no,
you
you
can
don't need
play
it.
it, and I remember from Gloomhaven playing the Spellweaver, which was the burn kind of character, right? You'd burn all your cards, then you get return all your burnt cards back to your hand. You can't do it one more time. I remember playing that a really conservative way. It was like a constant DPS, and it worked really well. But the Gemini just won't work because
Mm.
I could do these things, but I'm gonna be stuck at like super low level. Like I'm already a level behind you guys.
Mm.
And that's because I spent 1.5 scenarios not just burning my entire deck,
That's true.
which is a bit like it's a bit crap. But
I mean, I spent the first scenario not using a persistent card because
yeah,
I was
well, I
playing
mean,
vanilla as well.
yeah, that I get it, I get it. It's just
But I can catch up so fast because of the way that the Drifter earns XP, right? Through persistent abilities and being a
yeah.
DJ. So
Meanwhile, you've got Phil who says, oh, okay, I'm going to use this one card. I'm going to eat 6 shadows and do this really big attack. And you're like, oh, wow, that was great. Like, it's like a 7 PS6 attack and at range 6. That was great. He's like, oh, yeah, and I get 6 XP. And 6 XP, wow. That would take me 3 turns to generate if I burnt 6 cards.
yeah, and you go, Calvin, I move 2, I do 2 damage to myself, and I get an XP. And then I
Yeah.
get another XP just because.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
if for groups out there, if you have a Bone Shaper, they get a lot of XP for just getting XP. I'm sure that's a common occurrence in a
Yeah.
lot of groups.
So it's just a little bit tricky. I have to kind of play that way.
So Phil picked, for his battle goal, he picked Steamliner, which was have 5 or more cards at the end of a scenario.
He barely had 5 more cards at the end of turn 2.
Well, this is the thing. The battle goal he picked from the last scenario, which was exhaust before anyone else, would have been much better in this situation.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, so he failed. That's 3 fails. And then Calvin. Calvin had a centric. So at some stage, Calvin asked me, he goes, "Are you gonna go loot that?" And I'm just going, "Oh, maybe. I don't know." And he's like, "Oh, I'm just not sure." And then we kind of clued in that it may be tied to his battle goal, and the question was a little bit not too sure how this is going to work, whether or not you need to get fewer loot tokens than all others, or like at least less than one other person. And I'd seen it being discussed a few times on Discord, so I cleared it up kind of before he achieved it, just to give him an idea of exactly how it needs to be achieved. And he ended up, getting fewer loot tokens than all the other players. So he did complete it.
And I don't want to start like an argument here amongst either not us but the internet. But I feel like that card is worded terribly if it's supposed to be all. Because from memory, the card says loot less than any other player. Right?
Yeah, something
I
like
feel
that.
like if that is all other players, the word all would have been a perfect way of explaining all, right? Loot less than all other players makes sense.
Mm.
Loot less than any other player sounds like you have to loot less than one other player. But
Yes, it is.
just throwing it out there
Yeah.
that's how I would have worded it if I wanted to people realize that any meant all.
I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. I think it's if it causes the user to ask a question, and it's not just Calvin, you asked the same question when you first had it, when you were trying to first decipher it. So I feel, and the fact that it's being discussed, it's one that needed to be overlooked a little bit and double checked. So yeah, that was battle goals. We had one person complete a battle goal, and due to our special house rule that we've implemented, that that loot one's not coming back anytime soon
No,
because
they
that
don't have
one's
to
been
worry about it now,
done.
right? Even if they errata it. So
Exactly. Okay, so Phil's wonderful document on damage. So the damage in this was a little bit different because he wasn't counting bomb damage, I don't believe.
mm-mm.
But I think he was still counting it for getting hit purposes. I don't have
Oh,
the
was he?
exact. Well, there are a couple of eights in here, so they could be brittle hits. But there were 8 minus eights, which means that whoever mitigated the whole thing. So starting off with that Deathwalker, so Phil on his wonderful Deathwalker, he ended up doing 14 damage. And he ended up taking 14 damage, 3 of which was mitigated. So effective damage taken was about 11, which, yeah, it's an interesting scenario when we discuss it because there wasn't a lot of damage being done from normal means because obviously whatever damage we had was mostly going into these. In fact, I don't think too many abilities went into a creature. I'm pretty sure nearly everything went into a pillar.
Yeah, there was a couple of middle turns where we started thinning the herd a little bit, but yeah, you're right. We realized it was like blow everything up. All right, cool. Now let's move in and try and kill some things. Nah, killing things is not working, and there's way more than we can kill at a time. So let's just go back to killing pillars.
Yeah. He did. Let me check the healing. I'm just gonna add all this up. 0. So he did 0 healing, which is fine.
Actually, that's weird because he bought a healing potion.
Did he not use it?
He did. So I think he
Well,
failed to write it down.
Maybe he doesn't count it as a
Maybe. That's weird. So yeah, he did. So just on the back of the conversation we were having last week where the Deathwalkers can't heal, he went and switched out his potion for the healing potion. So he now
listen to
has
the episode and crack this out. So then went and crafted a healing
pretty much
potion.
like, oh, well, you guys keep complaining about this, so I guess I'll go buy a healing potion then. It's like, you have a healing card. Take the healing card. You do not need to spend resources on this. There's an entire card that's printed that gives you the ability to heal. It's like, it's all right, I've already got the potion. It's like,
And then
right.
he didn't even write it down.
And then he didn't write down his healing. So listening to this, Phil, all right, you are still on 0 healing after 9 scenarios. So
And then Gaz. Gaz on the Germinate. So 16 damage. And 2 was blocked. I'm pretty sure that's from pillars. So 2 hits on a pillar, maybe.
probably.
And then damage taken 47.
Yeah.
But you mitigated 34. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of card burn. I dare
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, that was burning like nothing else at the end.
Yeah, 47. Our Bone Shaper. Bone Shaper actually did a lot of damage because the pets were probably messing up a lot of stuff.
Mm.
And his damage numbers just keep going. They're little numbers like 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 4. He finished on 37 and only 1 was mitigated. He must have hit a pillar at the very beginning because I'm pretty sure nothing here has a shield.
Yeah, well, he was laying into the shield, into the pillar at the start, so there was a couple there
before the mobs came and took aggro from his minions.
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, he pulled off 37 damage. And then we had the Bone Shaper damage taken. He took 7 and mitigated 4 of it, which I don't think is right, Phil. I feel like his pets probably tanked a lot more than that. But that
maybe not. They were at the back a fair bit. Like Phil was taking a lot of that damage to the face.
Phil was definitely taking a lot of that.
Yeah.
But Phil, it says Phil took 14. Like surely he took more than that.
Yeah, maybe he didn't. I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure.
And then myself, Drifter Boy did 21 overall, and then 42 minus 32. So yeah, nice and well rounded. Actually, everyone did a little bit of everything. It looks fairly balanced, and apart from the Deathwalker, but Phil, I think you missed out on a lot of damage that you took to make up for that. So just give yourself some credit. You also got some healing in there, so make sure that you write those ones down. Let us have a little chat about what we thought about scenario 114. Starting with you.
Starting with me, what did I think? I really liked that it was a different type of objective. It wasn't kill all enemies, and there were some basic but interesting things to interact with. So the bombs use a top or a bottom action to get a bomb, and then you've got a bomb and carry it around. I think it had a really cool flavor to it, and the first room, even though we blew up those first pillars on literally first and second turn, right? Like, I mean, of our characters. So it was just in the first turn. Even though we did that, it kind of rushed through. That part was cool. Like, it was cool thinking about that. Even the next turn when Phil picked one up and was going to position it and having a look at how we could use the bombs. On the flip side of that, it didn't last long enough. It got to the point where it was too hard to go back and pick up bombs.
The bombs
and
became
then,
irrelevant.
Pardon? Yeah, well, yeah, that's it. So the cool mechanic that was get this bomb and use it to blow up the pillar became redundant because it was going to take too long to go back and get the bomb. And then even if we were, there were so many monsters that being able to move to the other side of the map without getting attacked at all or getting hit was going to be almost impossible, right? Like, it's, unless you had a really, really long jump card, okay, or did like a bit of a, you'd have to coordinate it because the monsters were spawning so quickly. We just didn't have time. So it was a shame that we didn't get to keep using it.
Yeah.
And that's probably where there was the yin and yang of this scenario was I think there was really cool parts of it, but then in the end it just became this mad rush to kill pillars because they had 5 health and 1 shield. So that's not really that tough.
6 health.
6 health and 1 shield. So yeah, sorry, thanks. Before we get no, but yes, they weren't that hard, right? Like, that's 2 or 3 hits.
Well, the minute we clicked on that, it was kind of like, well, some of us can rush to the back and start wailing on these. It became a little bit more because we've got this. There was this tense moment of the fact that we know that things are going to spawn over and over again, which means we're going to get overwhelmed, right? It's going to be like a zombie side kind of situation. We're going to, get overwhelmed, and we're not hitting and clearing any of this. And then maybe this is where the bombs come in handy, but you still have to get them all the way over there, which is going to take how many rounds before you get there? It just kind of felt it was climatic and anticlimactic at the same time. It was climatic because of the tenseness of will we beat this scenario? But then once we did, it was kind of like, was that fun? It was the first scenario that had me questioning it. It had so much potential just from the idea and the special rules. And I mentioned this to you afterwards. It's kind of like they could have tweaked the rules a little bit further, but then that would make the already large purple rule box even bigger by saying things like, oh, well, your first hit, if you discard a card, you don't get rid of it. Or, not lose a card, but discard a card or something. You don't drop the bomb and it doesn't explode. Or
actually, you 100% could do that, right? I didn't think of that. If you just burn a card, you don't bomb doesn't blow up.
Maybe not burn, but like.
But no, that is part of what we could have done. If you burn a card, you don't take damage, so therefore the bomb doesn't blow up. So technically, that's how you could carry the bombs across.
I guess. Yeah, I guess. It's just, based on movement, because of how long it is. And you got the difficult terrain in the way, you got the waves of creatures everywhere. It just doesn't seem very feasible to spend because you're going to spend one whole round literally picking one up. Because you forego that other app.
Well, totally, right? Because that's the thing. Like, where I found myself after the first turn, which was roughly about 3 or 4 squares away from the start, because I just jumped forward from my starting position, I looked at it and went, okay, I could spend a whole turn going back and picking up a bomb, but then I'm in this back corner, and there was monsters around, so I didn't want to do that anyway, because I'd probably just get hit and blow up. But if it had been clear, I could have jumped back and got one, but then by the time I then makes maybe 2 turns to move back to the next pillar, that's now 3 turns of spawning, which they were spawning a polar bear on 1 turn and then 2 snow imps on the next turn. So in 3 turns at minimum, right, that's 4 mobs that have spawned, right? And if there's nobody up at the far end, which is what you did and you jumped ahead, they would have all been coming towards us, which then just basically built this wall of monsters that we would have had to get through. And just looking at it, I was like, I don't think that it's worth taking so many turns to try and get these bombs. And if somebody else has done this scenario, we'd love to hear if you did it differently. Like, if you had a really good combo way of going like, oh yeah, we use the bombs through basically the whole scenario, we'd love to hear how you did it, right? Not a blow by blow, you don't have to tell us each turn, but just what was your general strategy? Because again, when we looked at it, it went like, it doesn't really seem like we should do that. And then because we didn't, it just felt like this just rushed the objective.
Yeah, and I think we talked about how we could have made the scenario maybe a little bit more interesting, that's still intricate, like brought the bombs into it a little bit, where maybe these pillars have actually got 3 to 5 shield on them, right? So they're really hard to actually hit with your standard attacks. But they obviously take big damage from the bombs to encourage you to use the bombs. But maybe the monsters don't spawn anywhere near as often. Maybe once every second round, you get a polar bear, and then once 2 rounds after that, you get the thing. So that actually gives you the time to spend all of those turns to try and get those bombs over. Whether you've got 2 people who are, in the first tile dropping the bombs halfway so that the other 2 people, I mean, that could be a way that people are doing it, but I still don't understand how they'd be able to get that off. Because you don't move the bomb spawn either. When the other things, there's just so many little factors in here that just feel a little bit undercooked.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that made the second half of the scenario just seem like we kind of all agreed we just got to rush it, is the spawning. The spawning piece I thought was really weird because it just meant you had to rush, right? And I remember we've had spawning in a couple of scenarios. So we've had spawning in the one where we fought the snow yetis with the altar that we had to kill, but they stopped. There was only 2 that spawned.
Yeah.
So we didn't kill the altar before it, so we had to fight all of them, but that was fine because there was only 2 extra. We've had the spawning in the tree one where we had the Shrike Fiends.
Yeah.
But they were every other turn.
Yeah.
So we managed to deal with that in a way that I remember Phil when I killed them, and so we kept them to a minimum. And it was starting to get out of control at the end. I think we had 2 when we won, and that could have very quickly escalated. But having them spawn forever and so frequently, and especially they were spawning in our way, like it just meant that it didn't make any sense to take any longer than we needed to.
Yeah, and the imps were 2 as well. So normal and an elite, and then you had the polar bear on the other side, so nice and tanky.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I can see people saying, the bombs are they're not for the pillars. The bombs are for, monster clearing. And your melee are, for the pillars, which, look, doesn't take away the point that you can still beat the scenario in the way that we did it. It's just how can you tweak the scenario from, a designer or from the from that design point of view to maybe take that idea and make it more complete.
Yeah, I think that's it. It wasn't too hard. It wasn't too easy, and I don't think that the difficulty needed to be shifted. I think just the because I think one of the things that Phil said was, in a scenario like this, it feels like you're not playing your character, and there was definitely elements of that because I was literally looking through my cards. I mean, other than when I just suicide and jumped in front of everybody, but I was looking at my cards just going like, okay, how can I just turn these into objectives? I'm not looking at the status effects because I'm hitting pillars. I'm not looking at the different interactions that my character has with elements and stuff because I'm just like, I just have to, how do I maximize my damage against a single target object? And
100%.
And look, that comes up in some scenarios. I think you definitely need to have different ways of winning. But again, I know Phil said it for him, and I felt the same way in that it was like, oh, I'm not really playing my character heaps. And yeah, it was just I guess, again, disappointing for what seemed like a really cool idea that it just didn't carry through the whole kind of scenario.
Well, the previous scenarios have, the more recent ones that we've done have definitely shaken things up, like the no prep ones and making you play a little bit differently. I've really, really enjoyed what they've been throwing. This is the first time where I've gone in going, wow, this seems really cool. And then, like you said, halfway going into it, just going, all right, where's my 3 attack? Oh, there it is. Cool. It's in my discard. Now where's my other 3 attack? Cool. Move to the next pillar. Try and survive. Just was the first one that just kind of a little bit, it just felt a bit meh. With its thing. I don't want scenario after scenario of, and I've discussed this with you, kill everything, all right, rinse and repeat, play the same cards in the same order, kill everything, and I know that's not going to happen, right? It's well and truly clear that it's not going to happen. We've got so many scenarios in this game, and from the very beginning, it's already started to shake things up, and I've been very impressed with what they've pulled so far. I've been impressed with the general idea of this. I love that they're being brave with some of these ideas. And just throwing whole, anything that forces you to spend a top or a bottom action to go for some kind of an objective, I think is really cool. I really like that little sacrifice and trying to work out who's the best person to sort of do that. I look forward to seeing more of those tough choices later. It's just, yeah, we had tough choices at the start, and then it literally became an RNG fest. You know?
Yeah, well, because exactly. If in two of those turns, like the only reason that it was a bit hairy was that we had the polar bears immobilized you literally the turn you wanted to go over and kill a pillar, and then we had two turns where the snow imps drew their attack everybody lots of times card. You know, if the bears just do a normal attack and the snow imps do one of their random shield kind of not attack things, then the end of that scenario becomes real easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think the idea that we don't want every scenario just to be killer monsters. I think that there have been a couple of slight variants to the killer monsters, like do a thing then killer monsters.
Yeah.
I don't mind the scenarios that are scenario ends when X happens, like the one we did previously, which was the tree. Is like kill the tree, it's scenario done, cool. Yep. And I like the idea of this, you know, the cinematic in a sense of you have an objective, you have to pile on, the monster's just going to keep coming forever. Like I love that cinematic.
Same.
It didn't feel like that was that epicness because it was kill these pillars.
That's right.
So
no,
yeah,
you nailed it.
And the thing is that, look, I'm going to be really interested to see as we go through the next few scenarios, but we've now had 3 scenarios in a row that have been no prep, right?
I have a feeling it's going to continue. I'll be honest with you. It's 100% going to continue. I'm okay with it because I think that it brings a lot of discussion with how we're going to approach it. And there are going to be times where everyone's going to be like, no, Daddy needs the prep. Let him do a quick round of it. And there'll be other times where Phil will be like, nope, screw you guys. I'm going in. Screw you guys. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting because as we unlock more of the classes, I imagine there'll be some that are better with openers than others. Like we have 4 classes that really need to do a few things at the start before they work well. I can do some cards, but I really don't want to be... I need a few cards out so that I can manipulate elements, get bonuses to damage so that I can really buff up my bigger attacks. And Phil famously needs 5 turns before he can do anything. And you've got all your stuff to strap on, and we've got a Bone Shaper who summons things, right? So we literally have a party of people who really want to spend a turn or two getting ready.
Yeah.
The only problem I have with these no prep scenarios, and it's not no prep in general, it's them all being no prep, is that again, it takes away your ability to do cool stuff with your character. And it's got to be a balance, right? Like, part of why we're playing is so you can line up cool things and do awesome stuff. If you keep putting people in a situation where you're like, well, you don't get to play any of your buff cards, which means you don't get to manipulate elements, which means you don't get to use the sub ability on some of your cards, it kind of starts going like, oh, okay, I won't do that. But
if they give you a reason to not do that, like to not prepare for it, because you don't get to do all that kind of stuff, but we've implemented an objective that has a very interesting element to it, or something like that to make it interesting. Because, like, I'm gonna oppose you a little bit on this, in that not being able to do my cool stuff all the time, it kind of sucks. But I like the fact that I feel a little bit muted sometimes, and it's part of the challenge. It's part of the puzzle. Otherwise it just becomes the choices of which persistent abilities. But yep, cool, I strap this, so I'm strap this. I'm going to have fun now and do the same things I always do. The fact that it hasn't been like that lately has, like, the last 2 scenarios from the previous one, with the especially the Raven's Roost one. That was so cool. Like, I really enjoyed.
And I agree. I agree. You shouldn't be able to do all your cool stuff all the time. 100%. It's the fact that if this is going to be the norm moving forward, then you don't get to do whatever. That's the problem. I just have a issue with building classes around having these things, and people who are playing probably listening to this going like, yeah, well, you've got to weave them through, right? Like, you've got to do a move and then do a top buff and then do an attack and do a bottom buff, and that's
or even coordinate it as a group. And just
that's the other way you can do it. There are ways you can do it, so it's not. There should be a full round of doing nothing at the start. I'm not kind of advocating for that. I think it'll get tiresome when we have this urgent thing that needs to be accomplished in the first turn every time, based on, and I don't know if that'll get old. I think it's like everything. Everything will get old if we have to do it for 150 scenarios, right?
Definitely.
So, yeah, maybe we've just chosen, I mean, we have 100% chosen the scenarios we've gone to, so we have chosen these. So, yeah, it'd be interesting just to see how it plays out a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's from that scenario. That's it. I'd love to see. I'm looking forward to more objectives, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be cool to do a little bit of a basic one. I think after the kind of run we've had, which is just like, hey, go do this thing and kill these monsters. So we need a crab smashing one. That's what we need. The crab smashing scenario was the just do whatever you want. So
the crabs disappeared.
I know we went hunting for crabs, and then there was none. They turned into crows.
Birdman.
Yeah. So.
So after this particular scenario, yes, we went back to do our last outpost phase for the session, making sure that we get into that routine now of ticking time along. And yeah, we had another outpost event.
It was, again, being super vague and non-spoilery. It was a decision to make about us choosing interacting with another person, and we kind of again looked through our cards to see if we could convince this person of the thing that we wanted to do. I think it ended up being really positive for us. I think we ended up getting a bunch of gold, and we didn't end up with any negatives, which it was weird because it was one of those ones. And these are the when I talk about coin flip ones, these are the ones I'm talking about, because both options sounded like they could be really good or really bad. It just depends on what the game decides, the interaction, because
it was more flavor than making a decision about something to do with us.
Yeah, well, it was, here's the situation. This person has an opinion on the situation. Do you want to lie to them or not lie to them, right? And I mean, the thing with that is that you don't know what their reaction is going to be either way. And I mean, you know, which is fine. You're not supposed to know the outcome of it, otherwise it's not a decision, right? But it was just, anyway, it was fine, right? Like we kind of talked our way through it. I don't think we had any of the special traits we needed to do it, but we managed to do the thing that the person seemed happy with.
Yeah.
But it's funny because with all of them, you're always wondering, what was the other one?
Yeah, and this is the thing I was going to say. When we do an event, whether it be a road event or an outpost event, we have Fortella reading it out to us. And when I have to flip the card, whatever the option that we picked, I actually cover up the other part. I actually have no idea what the other option is, just in case it goes back into the deck or something like that. I did this in Gloomhaven a long time ago, where I tried to ignore that as much as I could, and then went through them when we finished. I don't know if I read them with anyone. I might have read it with Matt, my housemate at the time, and actually went, "Oh wow, do you remember when that thing happened? This was the other option." I'm kind of doing that now. I know this is going to be really difficult for a lot to do, but it becomes a little bit harder if I'm the only one that knows what happened, and then everyone's asking me, and then I hand it around to everyone, and then it just keeps some of that intrigue. And look, whether or not we play it again, who knows? I mean, hell, if they bring it out on PC, I'd play this again with you if you wanted to.
That's how I've played it again, right? Like playing through, and I assume they will, because
definitely,
from my understanding, the Gloomhaven Digital's been like really popular, and they really seamlessly integrated Jaws of the Lion as well, which is probably something that a lot of Gloomhaven people haven't played, because it is kind of like a smaller version of it. So yeah, I feel it would be, and that way you get to pick the opposite of what you chose for all the other ones.
That's right. Oh no, if I'll forget and pick the same response. Yeah, but I'll keep the cards anyway. Then we basically went and did our collection of all our materials that we really needed. And then by that stage, we just started running out of time. Yeah, we did. It wasn't that exciting. It was okay.
Oh, it's not that exciting.
Super excited. Phil got super excited because while I was doing the event and coming up with all sorts of stuff, he was too busy looking at what cards he was going to choose, and he was very, very excited.
Yeah, I feel like I read his cards. There are some interesting ones there. I think he's most excited because one of his cards just says Spawn a Shadow. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, so he has the option now of doing his targety thing to spawn them, but also spawning them in another way. So it's
Spawn a Shadow and heal yourself?
No, there's no, because it doesn't heal, of course. Like, yeah, so I think we did that. We did the crafting thing. We built some buildings. Actually,
we upgraded
that's right.
The craft shop or whichever one.
Well, in the right order, because we keep doing this in the wrong order because we talk about it, then go back. But we actually found there's a whole bunch of craftable items that we didn't have in our craftable item deck, and they're the basic versions. So we had the ones you unlock when you get your crafting building, but we didn't have the earlier ones, the first lot. And going through those, I was like, oh wow, there's actually like a lot of stuff in here that would be really handy. I was like, I think I gave something to Phil. Like, you need to craft this. This is really good. It's like the spyglass, which is basically like your next attack, you get an advantage, right?
Yeah.
And then it exhausts. I'm like, this would be perfect. This once use, just you do it once, and you will guarantee that a big hit that you always crit anyway. But you guaranteed to make sure that you don't miss.
That's right, because I wanted to craft a shield, and some of the items in there actually have a requirement to actually make that shield, and it usually is a material and also the previous tier equipment. And I'm like, I haven't seen this yet. Where is it? And I finally said, where is item 10? Who's got item 10? And we had the piles around, and we realized items 1 to 10 was still in its insert, and we'd seen them at the very beginning when I think we were decking out our characters. Or something like that. I can't remember. But then, yeah, it was all these items, these tier 1 items that we hadn't seen that we were starting to get really excited about, because that's how we make the second tier.
Yeah, so we crafted some of those, which was fun. We got to craft beginner items because none of the other items we wanted. And then we built. Did we build the new crafting place?
Yeah, we upgraded it.
Upgraded it, yeah. So we now have the next level of stuff, which should be pretty cool for next time we get forced back to Frosthaven.
Yeah, where were our listeners? Where were the ones that were telling us we hadn't got all our items?
Yeah, where were you on that one, right? So we need to explain to everybody all of the things that we're missing, and that way they can tell us the things that we should be doing better.
That's right. So thank you all once again for tuning in to listen to another episode of A Master's Degree in Rolling Terribly. I've been Deddy, and I've been joined by Gaz.
And remember, when it comes to rolling terribly, and if you're playing the game completely wrong, it's all in the wrist.